Welcome, ladies. I am so excited to have you joining me at the table today and talking about this incredible project, These Stones. Welcome and congratulations, first and foremost. You guys are getting ready to launch on Up Faith and Family on September 5th. And what excitement that it's got to be like hitting each and every one of you right now that you are going to be streaming on Up Faith and Family. So congratulations. I'm looking forward to having some time with y'all and sharing about this incredible project today. First of all, I want to introduce each and every one of you. I have Cheryl McKay Price. She is the writer, showrunner, and executive producer on These Stones. So excited to have you. I also have Jeanette Town, executive producer, Erin Bethay, actress producer, and Charlene Amoya, actress. And you guys have done an incredible job, first and foremost, on this project. And I love that there's so many powerhouse women on this project. What is one thing that you cannot live without on set?
Mine would be chocolate.
Okay.
Keeps me awake.
I think for me it's like a water or an apple because sometimes I'll get dry mouth and before filming, so I just always need something to hydrate. That's always an unexpected thing that happens when performing, so something that will hydrate there.
Well, since I have so much experience being on set, and These Stones was my very first production that I've ever been on, besides, as a kid growing up in Southern California and running into like a taping of a TV series or something that they offered free tickets to. I would say it was definitely water on the set. You have to stay hydrated, and then maybe always look for a clean place to sit down. If you have if you have 2 seconds, if you have 2 seconds.
You mean on a dirty farm? No.
We had some days where that was a tall order, a clean place to sit down. I think my answer is a little bit out of left field, but the thing I really truly can't live without on set is like play. Like it's such hard work and it's such long days and it's exhausting. And if I don't intentionally make time to like play and joke around and be lighthearted, especially when I'm both producing and acting like I was here, it can get really easy to just get like bogged down in all the things. So, and water, of course. No one drinks enough water.
Right. And it's so interesting to me because when we talk about being on set, most of us, we know being in the industry that we are on set for hours. I mean, I think, depending on what your role is in a, specific project, you're, anywhere from 10 to 12. And a lot of times you're over that, 14, 16 hours a day. And in producing, when you're wearing those producing hats, it feels like it's 24/7. And it keeps going, it's like the Energizer Bunny where you just have to keep going and dealing with it. But so it's really good to have those things that you love on set and keep you, and hydration is a big one. My second question to y'all would be, is there ever been a time that you've been on set and somebody has told you, oh gosh, this is what's going to happen on set, or this is what you can, expect to happen. And it was a complete lie. I mean, have you ever felt like you walked on and you were just like, that was a lie. It never happened, or it actually exceeded your expectations and you really felt like, wow, this is something I want to keep doing over and over again.
Well, one of the things I can share that's actually a praise report is that we didn't have a lot of interruptions like that where things didn't go as planned. And we'll just look at the weather. We had 25 filming days and we never had rain. A hurricane came through Georgia at the time, and all we got was a sunny day with wind. I couldn't have, like, I had done an early line schedule based on actor availability, and I couldn't have one interruption, and it never wrecked us. And every day went according to plan.
Yeah, that was a miracle for sure. I mean, generally speaking, one of the things I always say is like the biggest lie told on any movie set is one more time.
That is totally the biggest lie.
Never going to be only one more time.
I would say it's like something similar to what Erin's saying, like we'll be wrapped in an hour, or, it's always longer, always be prepared to have a very long day. And But yeah, our set went really smooth. It was lovely.
This is such a powerful project. These stones, I've been watching the episodes. The stories are fantastic. The themes of faith are fantastic. I love how the biblical characters come into this modern day, you know, storyline. And so tell us a little bit about how these stones came to be, how this was literally birthed, I'll say that, and share a little bit about that and how it all started.
Our pastor at the church I attended, my husband and I go to in Northern California, knew that I had written and also had some friends in the industry. And he said, I'd love you to take a look at this project. I started writing a play, and then it turned into a book manuscript. And he said, would you like to take a look at it? And, yes, absolutely. I wanted to take a look at it because I love my pastor, super creative guy. And I looked at this, and the nugget, the concept of what he believes God gave to him, and I believe God gave this to him, was so unique. So I forwarded that to Cheryl, and we're looking at trying to do something creative that is honoring to God and allows the freedom to create what we feel, would honor him and also be good entertainment. So that went to Cheryl, and I kept saying, I love this concept. I think we can do something with it. And then that was it. I have no more creative bones left in my body other than to send her an email or to encourage her to look.
I love that though. Well, I love hearing that because you can tell that this story was really birthed from that there was a lot of a conception there that about a storyline like this. And I love how these characters were brought to life. And Cheryl, you really, I mean, you captivated so many storylines here that are really specific to what people are dealing with. And I love that you took these storylines and you really dug in. And I mean, I have to say, I mean, from opening up the first one and watching it, Charlene, to watching Aaron and Micah and Cameron Arnett and, Karen Abercrombie and Beth Becca. I mean, the talent that you have in this particular, in these stones is so fantastic. And they help to bring to life this series. But talk a little bit about how you were able to take the story that was presented to you and then start to cultivate this story and create these characters, the biblical side, and then also how you brought the modern day piece in it. And did you write with these people in mind as you started to craft the story?
Well, when Tim had asked himself a what if question, it was like it's based on that Matthew 27 verse about the when the tomb broke open and then all these saints rose from the dead when Jesus was raised from the dead, and they're walking around and talking to people. And so he asked himself, well, what if they never left? What if they're still here talking to people? And so it was such a great idea. And when I read it, it was co-written with his friend Peggy at church, and I was like, I don't think it's a feature film. I think this is a series because there is no shortage of Bible characters that we could match with people who have present day problems. And so the fun part for me was trying to figure out, well, how do I turn this into a TV show that people will want to come back to over and over and over again? And that's why I created the Stewart family at the heart of it, which is where Charlene plays McKenna's mom, who's played by Madeline Carroll, and then trying to figure out, well, if I only have 6 episodes to play with in the first season, I wanted to write it like it's a mini series as well as a first season so that we could for sure use it regardless, but then with the hope and the hint that we could continue for years to come. I mean, we're hoping for 10 years, pray. But it was neat to be able to look at, well, the Bible is still relevant today. Some people don't recognize that. But if you bring someone from the past where they get a chance to talk to someone going through something similar, then you get to show why the Bible was already relevant. Like you put Rahab with a teen cutter who has bad self-esteem because of promiscuous issues. And since Rahab was a prostitute, she has an in with her that somebody else may not have. So that's just one example of what we tried to do with those storylines. But the cool thing, like you asked about, did I have those people in mind? And the answer is a resounding yes, because in the beginning, when I started working on the stories, one thing I always thought, if we could make this local, make it here in Georgia, I wanted it to look really expensive, regardless of what kind of money we raised. The only way to do that is to find fantastic people who want to work with you. And so I went to people like Karen and Madeline and Cameron and Aaron and Catherine Shepler and early on. And then the director knew Charlene and Rusty, who play the parents. And it was like, do you guys want to be a part of this? Because then I was able to start writing roles with those people in mind, with the idea that hoping they would all miraculously be available on the same 25 filming days, which thank God it actually did work. And I got everybody that I wanted in the show. But being able to do that, where you could write to people you already know are very talented, but create characters that they can play, was really fun for me.
I love it. And I love that you took these characters and you really did infuse them with this modern day today, these characters, the Stewart family, and how you weaved them together. And I love Madeline's character. I mean, she's such a sweet and beautiful woman and so talented, and just a gentle spirit. But Charlene, that leads me to you because you play her mother. And, at first, and I can't give it away because there's a cliffhanger or kind of in the first episode, we find out some things that we're probably not all ready for. So I'm going to leave it at that. So everybody has to watch. But Charlene, you really have this beautiful character, and you're woven together, like woven through this project, all the way through every episode. And talk a little bit about what that was like for you to play this character of this young woman that, like I said, I don't want to give it away, but this young woman who is on a journey herself, and you have discovered something that is so powerful. You've become almost like the secret agent in so many ways, right? And you are the one that's walking alongside of a lot of these Bible characters for some time. What was that like for you to play this character, to play opposite of Madeline Carroll, and then to, in your own walk and your own faith, like how did you bring that into this storyline?
I think at the root of it, it's my character is, encapsulates a mother's love. And I think when I read the stories, it just seemed like, oh, she's trying to guide her daughter into, let's just say, her correct path, while allowing her to discover that on her own, with the freedom to make mistakes and allowing that. And so the thing that I loved about playing her mom was there's just such a sweet thing with mother daughter and throughout these episodes that we see often, and we even see in our pilot, this like father son injury, but this is mother daughter bond, mother daughter mishaps, and all the things that go along with that, whether you've had a good relationship with your mom or a bad. So it was so fun for me to get the material with a lot of time in advance, because I really got to work on of some of my own mother wounds and just that as a whole and what that brings to the table. Working with Madeline was a joy. She's a sweetheart, and shared some really cool God stories along the way, even that were impactful, I think, just to whoever was listening. And because I think there was three parts to your question. So it was working with Madeline. What was the other part?
Who your character, how your character, just as far as this kind of secret agent, some of the things that you were able to do. You come in and out of these, storylines, and you're really kind of this. It's funny because I see the different guides through the story. We've got Madeline, we've got, Cameron and Karen, and their characters, right? But I also feel like you're part of that voice. You're also that guide that's taking her through this journey and really pouring into her. And what was that like for you reading this material? There's a lot there, but just talk a little bit more about what that was like for you and the experience.
It was what I would imagine every parent goes through, with the balancing act of trying to guide your child into the right direction while allowing them to discover it. So you can't do it too forcefully, because that's the first thing that will push them away. So being there, having the words, and also allowing the space until it gets to a point where it's like, okay, this is too dangerous. Now I'm going to step in. But I think these are things that all of us deal with in all of our relationships, where we really want to see a loved one grow. And so it's providing support and encouragement and an example, and also knowing that our life's journey is to choose our path and make our mistakes. And so, therefore, we learn experientially. And the wonderful thing about that is then a person will really be committed to their direct and right path. Like if it's just forced on them, they may do it for a while to be obedient. But if they can kind of, go through it a little bit wobbly, go through the ups and downs of what life offers and come to it on their own terms, then they're there for good.
Absolutely. Well, and that's a great I love how you just explained it, and I love thinking about you as that guide, because you leave these beautiful pieces for her, these videos and these, it's really these testimonial pieces as you're guiding her through this experience. I thought it was really done beautifully, and I love how that's written, Cheryl. I love those elements to it that even as a mom, I think about that and think about, wow, what can I do even more so to leave things for my children, or for my loved ones in general, just even a thought, and making sure that, whether it's my husband or my parents or whomever it is, I just loved that piece of the storyline. Really, really great. And that's going to lead me a little bit. And Cheryl and Aaron, I'll start with you, Aaron. You were a producer on this project and also an actress. And you're wearing different hats, and the story that you tell in episode 3 is really big. And but first, let's talk a little bit, share about producing, share about, because I know you were also producing with your husband. Talk a little bit about the process and the project, and then we'll talk about your character.
So when this was presented, I think we were really excited. Drew and I have mostly produced features. We've only done a couple of series, so we were excited to be able to get our hands on another series. And then we also just really liked the concept. I like that it has a little bit of a, I don't want to say fantasy element, because the Bible is not fantasy, but a little bit of a miracle element to it, of this spiritual thing that is otherworldly that is sort of happening. I think that's really cool, because I also love, I'm a massive C.S. Lewis, J.R.R. Tolkien. I really believe in these stories that use fantasy and use this idea of magical and miraculous circumstances to sort of, in a less threatening and more entertaining way, bring the gospel right into somebody's space. And I think that was one of the things I was excited about with this story, was that element. So yeah, we got on board producing it, and the first couple of days of shooting were the days that I was acting and producing. And from also producing and directing Shari, those first few days, I mean, it's rough. You're trying to just get your feet under you and figure out what this is going to be, and the crew's all trying to kind of figure out how to work together and all of that kind of stuff. So it was a really interesting few days, but it really served, I think, where the character of Drea, where we find her in the moment, is she feels really lost and a little bit like she's trying to get her feet under her. And so I just used it. And it was also, no pressure, because I was also playing a character that was based on Cheryl's actual life experience. So that was also, no big deal. No, yeah, exactly. No pressure. Just do justice to this incredible story. And by the way, the woman who wrote it and lived it is sitting behind the monitor watching everything you do. So
when you start filming and it's your first couple days, I mean, the whole world is turned upside down, and it is, you're just running at it, trying to figure out how to make sure to hold on to those reins. But I really believe, Aaron, in watching that episode, I could, first of all, I could see all of that. And I'm really excited that you use the elements that you had right there. It's like that, all the energy that you had going throughout your body, and all the, whatever the anxiety and the fear and the frustration, you could see it all, and it was relatable, and you did it beautifully. Cheryl, this is a story that, again, you're sitting behind the monitor, you're watching Aaron, also Michael Lynn Hansen, who plays Sarah in it. You guys did such a beautiful job playing opposite of one another. I loved the heartfelt moments. Cheryl, talk a little bit about what that was like to watch your story, because, and I want you to share the pieces and the elements that you'd like to share about it.
One of the things, and I'm so thankful for Jeanette's support in doing this, is that I had 6 episodes to choose stories for, but I asked if she would mind if I used one of those to tell mine. And I wanted to write it in a way that was a story that I wish I had been able to watch when I was going through the story of this episode. So, for your listeners who may not have seen that episode yet, it's about my husband and our battle with infertility, and the 8 years we tried to have a baby, and me and my diehard faith, just like the character that I wrote for Aaron, believing that God had a miracle in mind, and then vacillating between that place of when do you give up, and is giving up a lack of faith, and that wrestling match that was always going on inside of me at the time. And also daring that, and not to be spoilery, but to dare to tell the story of what happens when there's a no, and how is it that that no is not hopeless. And so when I was hopeless, and when I did feel like the verse that came to mind a lot was that hope deferred makes the heart sick, but a longing fulfilled is the thing that fixes it. But if your longing is never going to be fulfilled, then the hope is hurtful. And sometimes we have to get to that place where we get that instruction from God that sometimes the no is a gift because it allows you to move on in your life. And so a lot of the things that we put in this episode, including the scene that I got to act out with Aaron, was actually happened to me, where I was in the waiting room at a medical office with a sonogram in my hand of a tumor that had continued to grow, and I was waiting to get it tested again to see if it had grown even bigger, which it had. And there was always the comparison to the fruit of what the sizing was, but all the other girls around me were coming out with their strips of babies, and I was watching the joy on their faces and thinking, like, they have no idea the dying inside that I feel right now. And it wasn't sad like that they are happy. It was just sort of that internal reflection. And so when I started working on the story, I'm like, I have to start her journey at that moment. And so that's the first time we meet Erin's character, is when she's in that waiting room, and the girl next to her is so happy to be pregnant, has no idea that that's what she's holding in her hands. And I thought, if I was willing to tap into some of that, I mean, this was a story that I never wanted to tell, and I didn't, and I never put it on social media. It was so embarrassing to me that I never shared about it publicly until now. And I don't mind now. But it was like God was saying, when Jeanette and I started working on this years ago, it was like, yeah, I'm going to heal you through telling your story. And that really was true, because he has shown up in so many ways to say, Romans 8:28, I'm going to use this in your life. I'm going to take the bad you've been through and use it for good. And I really feel like, even though this is just one of 6 pieces of this story, I feel like it's one that might be relatable to the audience that sees it.
I thought it was beautifully done, and I really commend you on using the story of Sarah in it, and how, because I remember watching this, and at that moment between Aaron and Micah, and Aaron, you say to her, you know, it's going to make me cry. You know, you're like, is this my miracle? You know, is this my yes? And because that's what we're all in that moment. We're waiting for that, right? Because that's, I think that's in our mind. And Cheryl, I knew that this was your story, but I didn't know all the details of how this whole episode was going to go down. And I just remember like holding my breath in this moment, because I've dealt with infertility as well. And it's so often we don't talk about it, you know? Um, and and I just held my breath, because I thought, oh my gosh, how is this going to be answered? How is she going to answer this? And how is like, how is she going to react to this moment? And so talk a little bit about that, because I know I held my breath, and you had to be just sitting there taking this in, and after you read it, because you weren't getting the miracle that you thought you were going to get, or even what Sarah did, but what you did, and Cheryl, what you wrote, was that you told the story from another way, that we as human beings too often take our own plans into our hands, and we don't allow God to do his work and his plans. And so the pain that comes from that, but then he turns all things to work together for good. And you show that so beautifully. So Erin, talk a little bit about that moment, because it was very heartfelt. How did you and Micah work together opposite of one another, and how did you and Cheryl end up connecting after that moment?
Yeah. I mean, first of all, I got really lucky that Micah was who was cast in that role. I love Micah. She and I have worked together before. We've played sisters, so we've had to go to some like rough emotional places before and build a lot of trust between each other as actors, which I think is one of the challenges of like being a film actor in general is, hi, we just met today and we're best friends who've known each other for 25 years. Let's build this immediate trust or whatever it is. And so luckily I had an actress that I knew I could trust and I knew I could feel really safe with in a scene that required a lot of vulnerability. But I think ultimately for all of us, as you alluded to, like we had so many wonderful, strong, particularly women on this set, but also just like really strong believers who have a real sense of the types of stories that we want to be a part of telling uh, from a faith perspective. And I think what all of us were really drawn to and what we weren't willing to let go of and what made the job work for all of us was being willing to let these characters be messy. It was Cheryl writing these, and like, with Charlene, with her character, like she is helping her daughter who is a mess. Like our lead is, there's a mess that's got to get cleaned up there. And I think for all of us that was the safe space. I think that was where Micah and I landed in working through those scenes, was like we don't have to nail it. We can let it be messy, and we can let whatever kind of comes up, whatever residual stuff that we relate to in this, because like we have all been at a point in our lives where we have been mad that God was not a vending machine where you put the prayer in and you get the answer out. Like we have all been at points where we've been frustrated that that isn't how this works, or where we feel like we have been faithful and we start to question his faithfulness when he's not doing what we want. And there comes a time where all of us have to learn that like his faithfulness and our fallenness don't always align. Like this thing that we want, we can't see the picture that he can see. And so we can trust him and we can step forward and we can be messy because he has made us clean already. You know what I mean? So like we can be like wading our way through this a little bit. Like he's got a plan and he's got this. And I think that's one of the things that all of us, Cheryl, Micah, and I know talked about a good bit on set. And I think all of us involved in the series, that was one of the things that we liked about that, was just the humanity of it all.
Mhm. And to add to that with Sarah, like one of the most fascinating questions I asked myself pretty much on every episode, but this one in particular, was what would it be like for a Bible character to have the hindsight that they have now because they're here in the present in our fictional what if? And because everybody did use Sarah against me and they would tell me to have Sarah's faith and I would be fine, it was like this. They were putting false hopes in something that God didn't have for me, but that was not, they didn't have anything malicious in that. It was just their genuine hopes for me. And to have Sarah be able to react to it now as Drea is telling her these things on screen, like people have used her story to hurt her. That was really, as a writer, that was really fun to play with.
Yeah. And I agree with you. I actually loved the idea that Sarah was in that moment going, no, this can't be. Like, no. I mean, I loved that moment and I thought it was so well done. And it was so, I loved the idea of the way that it was written because, her to stand there and then to be also have the humility to also acknowledge her failure at what she also had done past, right? With some of the things that she had done because she stepped into God's plan before God, you know, and he was already moving her. So well done on that. And I just loved how you did it. And I think that that's something, and I'll ask you, Charlene, the themes of this particular show. I mean, every one of these themes from the beginning to the end. I mean, you're tackling hard topics. You're tackling topics that are real. The division between a child and a parent, wanting to take care of a child, and, be that guardian at all times, no matter the cost, the loss of a child. I mean, there's, the opportunity, the infertility. Talk a little bit about what it was like for you. And was there a particular topic that really stood out to you in these stones?
It was a joy to go through the journey that my character went through with those issues. Potential losing of a child, tough decisions, facing potential death issues. But the one that I have lived with in my life that I was so thankful for that was addressed in this series was the one in addiction. Just, a lot of that in my family, and it was handled so honestly and so gritty and so wonderfully by the actress who went there. So it was interesting because we did a screening of this of our show at my house. It was a smaller screening before we did it in the theater, and my cousin happened to be out here at the time, and he was just, loved the pilot because that was just like, he's currently not talking to his father, and so it's like, oh, father son issue. So I just feel like already within our 6 episodes we have something for every family dynamic, for every family dysfunction in there. That's holds God and holds the issue, and how we can move through the really tough things while maintaining hope.
Mm-hmm. It's so good. I remember not long ago I was out, doing a prayer walk, and I was thinking about these stones, and thinking about the stones that have been left in place, and different places in the Bible where God calls us, or He called them to leave the stones for remembrance, and to look back at the promises that had been fulfilled, and also the things that the people had gone through. And I think about that in this series, that not only are you dealing with tough topics, but you're also providing and showing the promises of God. You're showing the hope. And so, you're not leaving one out without the other. But I just, the stones part of it was such a powerful, to see these stones pop up in these episodes, and then to be reminded of what we were tackling was so beautiful. Talk a little bit about that, because I also want to know, and you guys can all start popcorning on, some of these conversations, is, what do you want people to take away from these? Do you want people to think about every time, they see one of these stones, how is it living in their life? How is it affecting them? What is a memorial for them that they can place in their own life? But let's talk a little bit about that, how you want people what's the takeaway for this series, the stones, the remembrance, the promises of God, these themes, and just start talking about it and throwing it out there.
I think that when we are individually going through these crises, whether it's not being able to get pregnant, or having a loved one who is on drugs, or somebody is dying, or mental disorder, the pain, I think, makes the individual believe that they are alone in it. And the beauty of this show is that it's a reminder that you are never alone, just like on our poster, but also that, we're writing these stories from a place of understanding, and that there's not only is God always with us, there's always help, and that these are universal issues because we need to show up for each other, to remind us of community and the power in when 2 or more are gathered, the miracles that can happen. And so I just believe that these storylines are so profoundly impactful for all of us, and just throughout our fun vicissitudes of life.
For me, one of the big takeaways from the series is where are we seeking our answers when we come across these problems, right? I think we live in a society now where everyone's just like, listen to your gut, listen to your heart, trust yourself, go with what you think is best. It's kind of this like internal thing. And I think one of the things I love about this series is it actually shows us where we really need to, when we're seeking wisdom, when we're seeking answers, when we are feeling alone or feeling like, I think that's one of the lies of the enemy, is he makes us believe that no one else has ever felt the way that we feel. It's this very kind of like internal, almost narcissistic, nobody's felt it. Like, I know you've been through it, but you haven't been through it like I've been through it. Um, and I think that's one of the interesting things in the series is that there are two things that ultimately result in healing for all of the people that we see going through these things. And one is scripture, right? Like these stories, these people who are coming to life, they're not fantasy characters that Cheryl made up, like they're real people, they're real stories. Everything that they're telling our characters that they've been through, that they're going through, every bit of hope and advice that they're giving them is advice found in a book that has been written. Like there is a place you can go to get this wisdom and get these stories and connect with people like this. And also, I think one of the important parts of them appearing sort of undercover as modern day characters is that so many times our characters in the story are finding healing through relationships, right? It's through a person who comes into their lives and is willing to like stop and listen and slow down and let me hear what you're dealing with and let me hear what you're going through and let me support you through it. Let me clean up your yard or let me, whatever it may be in each episode. But I think, in addition to that, just relationship with the Lord being this thing that we go to, if we can look to scripture and if we can look to our relationships with each other for just kind of being like the two other hands that we can grab to pull ourselves out of that pit, I think I think that's a really important takeaway here, is that everything that you need is available to you in what the Lord's already given you. We've just got to be willing to receive it.
My prayer's been that this has this really cool, supernatural vibe to it, which is very enticing to a lot of young people. A lot of people today want to see this. They want to be spiritual and they want this kind of supernatural piece to it. I believe these stones has that little cool vibe to it, which is such an enticement for someone looking and saying, then all of a sudden they do, wow, this is really there's a Bible verse that says this. This is really somebody. And I pray that this develops a real thirst for somebody and a real desire for them to just go to the next step. There's so much that God has given us His word that everybody that watches us can take from it. They can learn from it. They can grow through it and then get that hole in their heart filled by only one thing. And that you all know it's your faith. So I'm proud to put my piece into it, and I'm grateful for everybody that was involved in, and Cheryl's amazing writing that made these stones just come to life. So
Yeah. Yeah. And I love everything you ladies have said, because one thing that really did hit me as I was watching it was when a scripture verse would be given, or, next thing it was, talking about Samuel or talking about one of them. And it's like, go look at the Bible, you can read about him. And I'm going, wait a minute, I know these characters, but I'm going to go check it out. I want to go see, what was that verse again, and I'm like rewinding it and, pulling up the verse because I want to get back in and I want to read and I want to know how is it applying to this particular situation in this moment, because you have done this really cool thing. You've created this very kind of undercover but secret agent, kind of like Men in Black, very, very cool, concept where you're going, wait a minute, did I miss something in the scripture? Because they're doing this kind of like undercover thing and I want to go check it out. So I think you did such a fantastic job, and Jeanette, I think you're right. I love that. The Lord is all over this. His word is all over it. His people are all over it, and our Bible heroes are definitely all over it. But I love how, Cheryl, you brought them into modern day, and you gave them a voice today, and you show them also serving the King. They're still serving. To God be all the glory. And again, you've all done such an incredible job. Um, Before we start wrapping up here, I want to ask you a little bit to go back to, because I saw this on the Up Faith and Family, and I was so excited to read this, that you have a personal devotional and the group handbook for season 1. And I thought, now that is fantastic because y'all have done a fantastic job with this series. You're tackling tough topics, and people are going to want to have an opportunity to get together and talk about these things. Talk about how they can get these, how they came about. Share a little bit about
Susan and I, the director, decided to co-write a book this summer. So we just realized that we wanted to make sure that it was not just entertainment, it was not just a TV show, and that we were hoping that it would bring groups together to start talking about these things, because it's not like every episode has a beautiful pat ending and it's over. It's like there's so much more to talk about. There's only so much you can go into those Bible character stories within an episode. And so we have the chance to talk about them, and we depict them as the flawed people that they were, because Bible characters are not perfect, but we get to dive a little deeper into each of the episodes through the book. And that's available on Amazon in ebook and hardback, paperback, that people can get, as well as once the show premieres on Up Faith and Family, they'll be able to watch it. It premieres every Thursday for the first 6 weeks of that. And we're hoping that groups will get together to discuss it, as well as do those activations I was talking about, where there's a lot of really fun group activities inspired by the show that we think could have that, you mentioned in the beginning, that ripple effect. That's a perfect word for this show, that we hope it springs out and goes far beyond us, because we're just a tiny piece of this puzzle, and we're hoping that it's going to have an effect on a lot of others.
On September 5th, we will be live on Up Faith and Family, and there is a QR code which we have put on our website and a lot of different media pieces we put out there that allows people to get 30% off their first month. And I would like to say that I know the network, I know of them, but now I'm a fan. And I don't know if I want to give another show some publicity, but I'm going to go for it. But they have this really cute show called Hudson and Rex. And it's about this police dog. And he's, the guy's a very, nice looking guy, Hudson. But the dog does all these little faces. But the thing about it, I realized, I watched it go, I love this. I love this streaming network. I'm going to be doing this forever, because I looked at an episode and I looked at my husband and I said, I don't feel slimed. Just watch the show. It was intriguing. We both liked it. Very interesting. And when I'm done, I don't feel like I have to stop it, fast forward through things that I don't want in my brain. And I said, this was good. This was great. And I feel like it's a good platform for these stones to be. I'd love everybody to, get that QR code, get the first month, and get the 30% off, and just check it out and check out what they have to offer on Up Faith and Family. It's quite a nice assortment of shows which your family can watch, adults can watch. Anyways, I am a fan now for sure.
If I can add to that, just as to couch how I see this show, is hopefully sparking mentorship, whether that's the Bible character who shows up to help, whether it's McKenna coming alongside and figuring out, well, how do I help this person when I'm so messed up myself? But that's the point of how she can. And I think back to what it was like, the time when Jeanette and I decided to do this show was a big turning point in my life, when you, Shari, were there for me, as well as Beverly Holloway, our casting director, and another young woman named Rebecca Cook, the week we were all at the Christian Worldview Film Festival. And I think back to you asking me to pray over all the women in the room that day. That was like a year to the day of the surgery that I had that ended my hope of having children. But it was also the turning point that healed me. And God told me to call Jeanette that weekend and say, we're not going to make the project I wanted to make yet. we're going to work on these stones. And I know that was a God directive that may not have happened had I not been there that week to be prayed over by all these people. And so I'm very thankful to you and the others that were sensitive to God's voice on a week that I really needed help, and I really needed that mentorship of all of you.
Mm. Well, you know what, that will be a day that will go down for me. I think about it all the time at Christian Worldview. And Erin, you were a part of that time there that weekend as well. And but that was just a glorious morning. And when we got to see all that God was doing, wow! I mean, He was just weaving us all together, and He had that perfect plan. So thank you for that. And you know, it does. I do want to say. And you know, feel free to add anything. Like I said earlier, you know, when we go back in, we'll edit. But you know, some of the themes of this particular series, I think, are so needed: forgiveness, redemption, discipleship, mentoring. Beth Becca's character, you know, just loving on somebody she knows is, you know, trying to clean up her life, right? You know, you have all these different elements: addiction, loss. I mean, there's so many different themes in this series. And so I'm really excited for people to watch this and to share it with so many others. You guys have just done a fantastic job. And I really, really hope that there's a season two. I can't wait to see more Bible characters. I can't wait to see more themes that you're going to hit and talk about. We all need these going, you know, we need this type of story day in and day out of our lives to remind us of God's plan for each and every one of us. So thank you, ladies, for being with me. If there's anything else you want to share, please do it.
There's one last thing I could say that I usually like to say for things outside. For anyone who's in your audience who likes to work in this industry, I just want to encourage them to think about the response they're hoping to get out of their audience, and that they remember that there's power in their pen, or there's power in their performance, or in the producing side, the directing side. That I feel like we're all held to a higher standard like teachers are in the Bible, because like it or not, our work affects culture. And I'm hoping that everybody in your listening audience, if they work in this industry, want to impact people for good.
I think one of the real strengths in producing these stones is we did have a very impressive crew of God-fearing, strong women. And that piece, this is not that I've seen a female-oriented business line of production film. It seems to be very male-dominated. That's changing now. But and my business for 25 years was technology, which I'd go into a room, 1,000 people, 5 women, and 4 of them would be somebody's assistant. And back in the day, someone's secretary. So that women bring such a neat dynamic to any business model that they're doing. I believe God creates us with this great way to be intuitive to each other, to the situation, and that communication piece. So I believe that core of what we did was just so godly and strong, and develop this wonderful cohesion with the strong, God-fearing women that He placed together on this team for these stones.
That's so good. I'm so glad you added that, because it is such a powerhouse team. I'm looking at you right now, and I know, you know, Susan is the director, and I'm sure just a ton of the different keys that you have. And God has given women incredible talents and gifts, and He's given them unique voices to tell stories. And I love that about what the Lord is doing. And yeah, if there's anything else that you guys want to add about that, we are all about the Women in My World is about empowering women. And so, you know, seeing how God is empowering his Christian women, and through, you know, using their talents and gifts. And so, and I know, Erin, you had a lot to do with that too, with as far as hiring and bringing on women, and I'm sure you did as well, Cheryl. So if you'd like, I'd love to hear a little bit about that.
I think just from my perspective, it was really refreshing. As a producer, I'm always kind of conscious of trying to hire well, first of all, but also of trying to give women in the industry, especially on the crew side, opportunities where they can. And so we had female first ACs and second ACs on this one. We had a female second AD, we had a female script supervisor, we had, production team, our director, many of our executive producers, largely women, and of course, many of the creative departments were women, which is fairly normal. But it was lovely, and I think one of the things that I appreciated too, and it shouldn't go without saying, is when you have this many women in leadership, it's really important for the other men in key roles on set to be supportive of that role, and to be respectful of that role. And, I personally, I didn't have any trouble getting any of our guys to do what I needed them to do when the time came. And it would have been really easy to do the thing, because it's my husband and I, and we're a team. It would have been really easy to do the thing that I think I've seen a lot of people do, which is I come in the room and say something and everybody turns to look at my husband to see if that's what they should do, which is fun. But we didn't have that on this one. And that was just really, I think, a testament to the spirit of the whole thing. And I'm a big believer that the energy on a set starts at the top and it trickles down. And I think because the couple of men that we did have at the top alongside us women helped set that this was a professional working environment, and we're going to respect one another, and we're going to listen to one another, and we're going to support one another, and best idea wins, sort of thing, I think is really important. And it was a pleasure to work with this many strong, godly, powerful ladies who aren't there because they are women. They are there because they are absolute powerhouses who happen to be women.
Yeah. Yeah. So well said. I love that. I love that, because they've been educated, they've been provided the resources, they can do the job, and that's a really cool thing. So before, I can't let you guys go though without asking Charlene, what was it like to work with the female director? And was it your first time?
Not my first time with a female director. First time with Susan Rohr. I will say, I remember distinctly staying after one day when I had wrapped and just sitting next to Cheryl in the chair and being with Susan and just feeling oh, this is the dream, actually. Working with people that I have love for on material that has real purpose and that's really life-giving. There was so much joy in that. So thankful to be part of it, and for the group that came together, and thank you, Jeanette, for helping us make this happen, because it's been now 3 years, right, since we started. So since we shot, but it's been quite the journey, and you never know what's going to happen with something. So we are all just so thrilled that this is going to see the light of day, and I believe really affect and give hope to people in their lives.
I love that. Well, I always say, for such a time as this, God's plan, people, provision, and project he knows exactly when, where, and why. And so he has this one set up and teed up for you guys. I think it's going to be a fantastic time for you ladies. So thank you again. Thank you for joining me. Thank you for coming to the table. I cannot wait to watch this. Everybody who is listening and watching, the Women in My World, thank you for joining us at the table today. Thank you for committing your time to listening to these powerhouse ladies. And we're praying that you will jump on and make sure to subscribe if you're not already, but you will watch These Stones September 5th on Up Faith and Family. You do not want to miss this series. So, and go out, share it on your socials, share it wherever you can. This is a powerful, powerful series that you want to be a part of. So thanks again for joining us.